Hi everybody, my name's Neil Wainwright. I'm the founder, CEO, and cheerleader for UpHabit. We're a new tech startup in Toronto. We started about a year ago. It's my 8th startup, so it's not my first. And I sold my last one a couple years ago, and I decided to start another one against my wife's wishes. But she told me as long as I'm having fun, I can keep doing it, and I'm having a blast. So I'm here to share with you a little bit about our journey, and in particular what we've done about creating an organizational culture at the start of our business, and the kind of impact it's had in terms of our organization and our potential for growth. So if you have any questions, please ask me at any time. It's very interactive, and it's also something where I'm very comfortable talking about any issues that you might face in your startups, because I've done this a lot. And I do spend a lot of time talking to entrepreneurs about their businesses and any scars or bruises that I've gotten along the way, and lessons that maybe I can share with you about that. So the main thing is, if you're just starting a startup, is to get the culture right and get it done right now. It's more important than the people that you hire, because culture defines the type of people you hire. So if you get the culture right first, you're going to attract the right people for your business. But the other things that might not be as intuitive to you if you haven't done a startup before is it's also more important than getting the product right, or getting revenue, or even funding, because culture really drives the type of company you're going to be. And it's one thing to work on all those things, but if you don't have a solid foundation beneath them, it's gonna create some friction and some issues for you down the road. So if you've just done a startup, well, by all means, get your culture set properly. And if you're a year or two old, you're probably already feeling the pain, because you're struggling with the product, you're struggling with how to make decisions about the product and your team and all that stuff. And that's because you really haven't settled on the culture and the guiding set of core principles and values that are going to drive your business forward. Now, if the culture isn't right, you're not going to attract the right people. I did a talk about 2 years ago where it was me giving back to the community, talking about lessons I learned during startups. And what was interesting is I did it as an exercise to give back to the community, but they also videotaped it like we're doing today. And actually, I got a YouTube video of it, and then I posted it when we were hiring people for UpHabit. And a lot of our existing team members watched that video and liked what they heard, and it was part of their decision process in joining the company. But it was also, I was talking about culture and things I'd learned during startups. And so you won't attract the right people that you want. You won't keep the right people that you want to keep, because if your culture is toxic, if your culture is one that's not aligned with what you're stating publicly, you're going to create a lot of friction, and you're going to run into trouble down the road. Your product will suffer. Like our values are such that we're very focused on our end users and making sure our end users are happy, and that's part of our values and our corporate culture. But as a result, our product is well aligned with what our customers want and what they're going to want us to do in the future. Revenue also gets more difficult. My last company, I would talk a lot to protect potential customers, and companies like Fitbit, like Slack, like Marketo, like Indeed. And most of those, I'd say a lot of those customers that I won were based on them getting a sense for the core values of our company and believing in us. Even if we didn't have a feature that they wanted that we didn't have, they knew that they could trust us based on our culture and our values, that we were going to deliver it for them. So it was very interesting to see how I was competing in the market and always winning, usually almost all winning against our competitors. And a lot of it I attribute back to our core values, our culture, and how we worked with customers. So you'll find that if you have the right culture, things come a lot easier. They're still hard, but they'll still come a lot easier. The other thing that's interesting to note is if you're looking for funding and you're trying to raise capital to grow your business, if you have the right corporate culture, typically VCs will be big believers in having the right corporate culture, and they will actually pay attention to your corporate culture when they're listening to your pitch deck and they're evaluating you as an investment. They'll be looking at you and saying, okay, well, aside from some of the hard things like what's the product like and what's the makeup of the team, they'll be assessing what the quality of the culture is, because that is a strong determining factor in success within especially startups, but all companies these days. So when I talk about corporate culture, I really talk about two things. One of them is the set of core values you have as a company, and that should be no more than 4 to 6 different values that you identify. And they should all be consistent, and they should all fit and work well together. And the other thing I look at for corporate culture, and I have a number of my team members in the audience now, so they're probably going to tell me I missed some things in the list. But it's principles and key beliefs. So the things that you know you're always going to believe in, and they're always going to guide you along with your core values in making decisions within the company. And I can tell you that with UpHabit, it's very interesting as we go through and the company grows and matures along with the product, we're seeing these core values and principles are really guiding our decisions and how we work together as individuals and how we work with our customers and how we even define and build features. So it's very important that you get these kind of things correct in your culture, because it will help you grow your business and be more successful in the future. With UpHabit, it's kind of fun because since it's my 8th startup, I decided to define the values before I even hired anybody or even begged people to join or whatever I did to get this great team I have. And by defining the values, they had something to look at even when the company didn't have a product, even when the company didn't even have an office. They could look at the core values as something that they wanted, they believed in, that were aligned with their own goals and their own values. And that's one of the things that's important, is if you have a mismatch between values, between the company's values and an individual's values, it will not work out in the long term. And I've seen that throughout my career, is when you have an alignment of values, it's awesome, and everybody gets along and everybody works hard to get the right things done. But if you have the company's values don't align with your own, it's probably time to find a different company, because you're eventually not going to fit in. And that's just what my experience has been for over 30 years now. Now, what not to include in, when you talk about your corporate culture, it should have nothing about operational processes, because those things change all the time. With UpHabit, as we grow, we're probably going to change our internal processes every 6 months. Corporate values and corporate culture does not change, should not change at all. So it could be refined a little bit as you grow up and things like this, but it really shouldn't change in any fundamental ways. Another thing is not to include anything about your product, because as UpHabit, we might change what our product does. We might pivot a whole bunch of times with our product, but our culture and our values don't change. So it's basically, it's kind of funny that corporate culture is one of those things. Everybody talks about change and being embracing of change and being rapid in changing and all this kind of stuff. But when it comes to corporate culture, that's the one thing you don't want to change, unless you have a bad culture. There are certain organizations certainly that you've seen in the news where they've maybe had a bit of a broken corporate culture, and they have to bring in a new leadership team to kind of fix it. And that is one of those cases where you want to change kind of an unhealthy culture to one that's healthy. And that's happened with from time to time. But the other thing you can actually see happen, which is the flip side, is if you have a really good corporate culture and then the leadership changes and then you go to an unhealthy corporate culture, which again doesn't align with your own corporate culture, and you're eventually going to leave. That's how I found some great team members over the last year. So again, this is what I was saying earlier, culture should not change. It's one of those, it's your guiding light, and guiding lights don't change. It's a belief that you're doing the right thing, working with the right team, working for the right goals within the company, and this is something that doesn't change. What was interesting, it was really hard for me to find a visual picture of saying don't change anything, because the whole world is about changing rapidly and everything like this. But this is one of the things that you shouldn't really change unless it's broken. And actually, if it's broken, you have an interesting challenge as team members in terms of what you do, because corporate culture tends to be, it's a collective thing that everybody buys into and agrees, but it's kind of supported and advocated by senior leadership. And if you have a wrong culture, for you, it means that the senior leadership in the company that you're looking at is not aligned with your values. And you're kind of at a tough thing where you can't change that. You can't change the CEO, or at least you can't change it very easily. When that happens, but that's the kind of thing that might need to happen for an unhealthy culture to get better. And you see that with what happened with Uber. over the last year or so, where they had maybe a difficult corporate culture. They were very true to that culture, but it didn't work within the larger community that they were trying to operate in, and they had to, make that change to come up with a healthier culture, and that required a change at the top. And that's something that's kind of important to know, is if you look at a corporate culture and it's unhealthy, or it's not aligned with, it's not even unhealthy, but it's not aligned with your own values, it's coming from the top. And that's a very difficult thing to change. But the flip side is, if it's got a great culture and it's going to be supported by the top, so it's going to be there for quite a long time. You don't have to worry about it as much. So the other thing is that it's not just about, if you're doing your own startup, you can advocate all you want for a certain culture, but if your fellow team members don't believe in it, then it's kind of going to die, because you're obviously misaligned with them. And they will also join a culture they believe in. And what's interesting, when I'm still doing a lot of interviewing, I do the frontline interviewing for UpHabit, and it's a telephone screening, and then they go through code tests if they're developers, and then they go through a team interview, and they go through technical interviews if they're technical. But I would say the majority of the people that I pass on for second and third interviews and code tests and all this stuff are people that talk to me about culture and the corporate culture and what they really want in an organization. Typically, if someone's talking to me and they just talk about, well, they want to work on this technical thing in depth and everything like this, but they're not talking about the team, and they're not talking about how to work, they like working with great people and all that stuff, then I look at that as a bit more of a negative, because I think that they might not fit in with our team. And so I kind of, when I'm doing interviewing, I'm looking at culture fit almost one of the first things that we do before we screen them through the other parts of the process. Culture can also get you through tough times with a smile on your face, because in any company, in any job, you're going to run into days when it's not as much fun as it would otherwise be. Just because that's the nature of business. I go through it, and everybody goes through it in their careers. And if you're surrounded by the right team and the right culture and the right values, it really helps you get through the day really, really better than you could otherwise. And again, I've said it before, but anybody not on board with the corporate culture will eventually leave. Sometimes, what's interesting is, if you're a startup, and this happened in my career, is I would actually get around to defining the corporate culture years into that life of a company. And then we define the culture a certain way, and then we look around and realize that some of the team members don't believe in the culture. So they might decide to leave, or the company might make the difficult decision to have them leave, because obviously if you have people that are misaligned with the corporate culture, it's going to create a lot of issues, not only with themselves and their level of comfort and happiness in what they're doing, but also with the people around them. And what I'm very fortunate about with UpHabit in particular is that I defined the culture and then hired everybody, so the team are all really well aligned, and they get along well. Now, the upside of an aligned culture, the famous rowing photo that everybody puts up, but everybody's pulling in the same direction. They're all coordinated. It tends to be a really strong team and a great place to work. And it's also where you can do your best work, because if you're aligned culture in terms of core values and the corporate culture, then you don't have to worry so much about bureaucracy and politics and all that kind of stuff. Unless, in fact, that is what your corporate culture is, and then you're going to be really happy if that's the kind of stuff you get into, because you're going to be doing that stuff a lot. The last point I have here is that the right culture and the right set of values guide all of your decisions. So I know at UpHabit, when we're making decisions, we have three priorities. It's our team, it's our customers, we call them habiteers, and then it's our product or our app. And we kind of look at things in that order. Are we doing the right thing for the team? Are we doing the right thing for the customers? And then we look at our product and how that all fits in. So, what's our culture like? Well, you can see some people walking around with our t-shirts on, but it's, again, our team, our habiteers, and our app, and we do that in order. And actually, in my prior companies, I probably would have put all three of those. I have some former team members that work with me that would say that I did all three of them at once. And I think what's different about UpHabit, which I'm really proud and pleased with, is that it's team number one, and then it's our customers, and then it's our app. And that's just an evolution of my growth as a leader, and you know, what I think is the right thing to do for everybody. Our 4 values are quality, passion, empathy, and intelligence. Another one I'd add there is integrity. And it's really important to us when we're dealing with our customers' data, and we're dealing with you know, private contacts and helping people stay in touch with people and really enhance their relationships with their personal network. It's important that, you know, quality, that we have these values, integrity, quality, passion, and empathy, because they're really what drives our customers to have faith and trust in us that we're going to do the right thing for them. Now, at the bottom of this slide, I mentioned mistake, sharing, and wilt. One of our core principles of the company is we want people to make new mistakes. So we're not afraid of mistakes. We don't get down on people about mistakes. We want to actually celebrate those mistakes, because that actually says that something happened where they pushed the envelope a little bit, they've learned something, and that's made them a better person, a better team member. Their knowledge and skills have gotten better because they've made a mistake and learned from it. Now, we say make new mistakes because we don't want to keep repeating the same mistake over and over again, because that's bad. But it's all about making new mistakes. We also have a culture of sharing, where we want to share our knowledge, share our experience, share everything to make sure that you know, we're helping the community. That's part of what we're doing here with NewCo and with Elevate, is we want to share some of the stuff that we've learned along the way, and hopefully that's going to help other people in their businesses and their careers. And then wilt is what I learned today. So as I learn new things, we actually you know, share. These are all Slack channels, by the way, though. So if you guys know Slack, we have a bunch of Slack channels that we keep trying to cut down the number of, but they keep growing up again, and then we keep cutting them down. But wilt is one of them, where it's like what I learned today. So what new experiences have come to me recently that help me personally and help me with my job. So because we're very much, I want a strong learning culture at the organization. You know, I call it a time warp, where someone might look back after 3 months and realize they learned 2 years in those 3 months. And that's something that's really important to me, because as we grow and as people develop, I want them to gain new experience and be, you know, better and more valuable people that, you know, in their careers. And then finally, so this is just me, I'm always offering myself up to give advice, to just sit down and talk about product ideas, marketing ideas. I guarantee you, if you run a startup, the HR issues will hit you within the first 10 employees, and they'll hit you right between the eyes. You will not be expecting what comes your way. And you know, these are things that they never teach you in business school. They never teach you in any of the books. It just, well, some of the books now are getting better at it. I do a lot of reading, so I have a lot of, you know, I read a book about every 2-3 weeks. So I have a lot of books that I've read that are around business and building businesses and corporate culture and all kinds of things, and I'm happy to talk about this. But at any time, if anybody wants to sit down with me and just bounce anything off me, I'm really happy to do it. I have some scars that have never healed. I got a bunch of bruises that have healed, and I've made a lot of mistakes along the way, but I think it's helped me grow as an individual, and if I can do in any way help you with your careers and your businesses, I'm happy to do so. So with that, I wanted to say thank you, and I'm kind of open for questions. Does anybody have anything they want to ask me? Yes.
So regarding the UpHabit, like, when is the beta going to be released?
For the app?
Yeah.
iOS or Android? Android, yes, good question. Well, the Android, one of the lead engineers is sitting 2 people down from you, so you can ask him. He's right here. His name's Abdo. And Android's coming out in about 2 weeks. And the product manager is right behind you, by the way, so you can ask her too. Android will be out in about 2 weeks. And iOS has been running for about a month now. iOS will probably hit the App Store in about a month or so. Android will probably follow about a month after that, but the Android beta is going to start in probably a couple weeks. But don't hold me to it, or don't even hold them to it. Quality-wise, we make sure it's got very good quality with the right features before we give it to you. Even though it's beta, we kind of take great pride in our work. Yes, any other questions? Yes?
So what's up?
What's UpHabit? Oh, that's a good question. UpHabit is it's called a PRM, a personal relationship management app. Now that doesn't really tell you much. What it does is it actually connects to your email and your address books. It kind of creates one master address book of all of your contacts, but it makes it very easy for you to set follow-up reminders, to make notes about people, to tag them in different ways. If you've used tagging systems, by the way, before, we've just done a survey on the tagging that we added to UpHabit a couple weeks ago. And we're getting a lot of 4 and 5 out of 5 star ratings for it, so we've actually done a really good job with it. It allows you to kind of, and obviously I've been using UpHabit myself. It's kind of really cool to see. I'm reaching out to people I haven't talked to in 10 or 15 years sometimes because they're in my address book. They're historic, and it's allowing me to kind of stay in touch with people I've always wanted to stay in touch with, but I kind of, like most people, suck at it. You know, you meet someone, you get their business card, you put it on a desk, you get a whole bunch of them, you put a rubber band around it, stick it in the box with all the other piles of business cards with rubber bands around them. So UpHabit's whole purpose is really to help you with your personal relationships, staying in touch with people, and keeping track of all that stuff. Any other questions? Yes?
What would you suggest in terms of like best practices of making sure that your culture stays at the forefront of all day-to-day decisions?
The question was, what can you do to make sure your culture stays at the forefront of all your decisions? I was going to say something funny, like put a poster on the wall in every room and all that stuff. I think it's a collective team responsibility. So the leader might stray from it, I might stray from it, but then it's other people will point that out and say, okay, well, we didn't make the right decision or we're about to make the wrong decision because we didn't think about our values and how that should all fit together. So I think it's a collective responsibility, but it's a really good question. It's like, how do you keep the culture really fresh in everybody's minds and current? I know one of the things that really says you've got a really strong culture and strong values is when people start mocking you for it. So I know that with my last business, I always would tell our customers the answer is always yes. So what's the question? And they would start and I remember a lot of the strategic partners we'd work with, I'd always go to their conferences and I'd always say the same thing when I stood in front of them. And when you're having drinks afterwards or meeting afterwards, they would always tease me about it and like, come on, you can't be true and you can't be serious. And then they realized that after working with us for a while, that was exactly the way we were. And then they would actually tease me about it, but still understood that whatever they wanted, they would get. But to your question, it's a collective responsibility, and it's something that the leaders should always keep in the back of their head. But they're human too, and they're gonna make mistakes. Yes.
So I noticed you guys are on LinkedIn.
Yes.
Do you guys have any plans to integrate with LinkedIn because it's a huge, kind of like a PRM, but not necessary?
Yeah, basically we don't do any of the things LinkedIn does, and they don't do any of the things that we do. But yes, we are on LinkedIn. LinkedIn actually had an open API so that we could do the kind of integrations that you might wish we could do, and they closed that down in 2015. And what we're seeing now with Facebook is they have those very open APIs and they're starting to close them down. So there are things we're thinking about doing in terms of LinkedIn integration that we're not ready to share yet, but part of the challenge is that we're limited by the level of access we get to them, and that is a corporate decision on their part where they just don't have the APIs anymore to do that. But we're thinking about stuff we can do to kind of work around the edges of that. Any other questions? Anybody in the back row? Yes.
So you mentioned that it's kind of like a follow-up or like suggestion-ish.
Reminders,
yeah.
Making notes, yes.
So regarding integrating with other platforms, right? Have you guys made any considerations on having a kind of distributed or decentralized platform where people can just directly share information and along those lines?
We haven't looked at any kind of, we're not a social network, and we're not planning on being a social network. Because people trust us with their data, we treat it very privately. And we will never have a social graph of people's connections and all this kind of stuff. This is really about helping them with their personal network, but doing it from a private perspective. In terms of what we do going forward, in terms of if we know that there's two people that use UpHabit and they're friends with each other or connect, or have each other in their address books, we don't know what we're going to do with that down the road, or if anything. But it'll always be done from a very private perspective. And if anything, you look at the social media networks out there and how open they are and how that can kind of create some issues. And then you look at the CRM systems on the other side that are all business and corporate. We kind of sit in the middle, where it's about you and your personal network. Like, you'll take UpHabit between jobs and between careers, like you do with LinkedIn. It's not something that the company owns. It's something that you personally have. And we'll also be a subscription service. So what that means is that you're our customer. We're not trying to sell your data or put ads in front of you to slow down your day. We're actually your only customer, and our job is to make your life as efficient and as productive and positive as possible. Any other questions? All right, well, thank you very much. I think we've got some t-shirts and things to hand out, and I appreciate you taking the time to come in and listen to the talk. And like I say, all my contact info is here. That's my cell phone on the bottom, and you can reach out and we can talk anytime. Thank you.